Hello everyone. We decided to do another video today because I'm going out of town tomorrow and we had a great question to answer. It's really great and applicable to everyone, and I know that I felt this many times.
How many times?
Many times. The topic of like, do I need to force myself to change? Like if I'm noticing like there are things about my life, if I'm causing consistent issues, if I'm not like, do I need to just like buckle down? Is like the thing that's going to make the biggest difference for me? Is it going to be like some kind of like constant self-discipline and constant like forcing myself to change? Is that going to be the answer for me, like having more fun in my life and enjoying myself and having happy relationships? Like for a long time I thought that that was going to be the thing that was going to help me change. It's just like I just need more self-discipline. I just need to like wake up and force myself to be different than I am. And if you've ever tried that, you've probably discovered it doesn't work, or it works for a little while. That like being on constant like self-watch mode of like, okay, I'm not going to screw this up. I'm not going to, make a passive-aggressive comment. I'm not going to do this. And you're kind of like in that zone. And then inevitably you kind of forget that you're kind of doing self-discipline right now and slip back into old patterns. And so it's like, well, what is it going to be that's finally going to get me to change in this way that like, my significant other, people in my life are like, hey, you need to change, or you're noticing that like you're not getting the results that you want. And so we're going to talk tonight about
Did I ever do that? There we go. Hey.
Well, actually, yeah. I mean, there were times in our relationship early on where it was like, hey, these things don't really work for me. And so
It's different.
That is different. Yeah. Don't let me mischaracterize you. Steve will set the record straight. Anyways, we want to talk about like, is forcing yourself to change the way to actually create the changes that you want in yourself and in your life?
Oh, did it work for you when you tried it?
Heck no. I always thought, okay, today, this is going to be the time. It's kind of like that. You make that declaration maybe to someone else. You're like, I will never do blank again. I will never be this way again. I will never not work out. I will never, say something rude to my partner. I will never, ever, ever do that. And typically, if some type of change in your life is preceded by some like overt declaration, it rarely works out. I have found in my own experience, it's been those times that I'm just like, I'll never do it again. I'm going to force myself to be different. That's
when I know I'm in trouble.
Yeah, right? It's like and we've noticed that as far as patterns go, it's like you're signing up for another round. If you're doing that, it typically doesn't result in like that long-lasting change that you're looking for. And so the approach that, that worked for me and that we teach to people is much subtler, and it doesn't seem as like shake your shoulders, okay, you got to be different and like boot camp every day. It's very subtle and it's different, but it's extremely effective in the way that it works.
Yeah, it's interesting. So like for me, and I noticed this myself, and I think that this is the case for a lot of people. As soon as I start talking about forcing myself to do something, I've already begun this process of dissociation. So there's the forcer and the forced in that situation, all contained within my mind, within myself. And by the time I've done that, I've already begun the process by which I'm deluding myself. Because if I have an experience that there are parts of me that are me, and then there's parts of me that aren't me, that's essentially a mild kind of schizophrenic state in a way. And I mean, in everyone, what constitutes like a mental illness really is not anything other than it's something that not everyone does. If everyone did it, if everyone were schizophrenic, then it wouldn't be in the DSM. There probably wouldn't be, It just wouldn't be a thing. Everyone, oh yeah, you hear that voice that's not there too? Oh yeah, and there are these mild forms, and I know for me it was that way, was that like I was able-bodied, I had, average mental functioning capacity and all this stuff, on a good day, and yet I wanted to go work out, and it wasn't happening. What's that about? There was a part of me that felt like I wasn't in control of it. It was as if there's a part of me that was like gonna cause me to be a jerk. And it's like, oh, that's the jerk part of me. That's not the real me. Other people couldn't tell the difference. And what really changed stuff for me was when I started to say, okay, if that's my experience, that there's me and myself, or there's I and myself, and I have to force myself, but sometimes myself won't cooperate, and so then I just have to do whatever myself wants. I am building, right? I am creating an experience in which certain aspects of myself are out there or over there, or I'm blaming that part of myself, not even with other people. That was the thing too, is that I wouldn't necessarily try to explain to other people why I wasn't doing things by blaming, saying, oh, I just couldn't get myself to do it. But I would talk to myself. That was my experience, is that there were certain parts of me that just wouldn't move and wouldn't budge. And so I said, that's interesting. If that's part of what it's like to be me, if that's part of my experience, I'm creating that. How do I create that sensation? How is it that it's interesting too, because it was an assumption. It was this assumption that said, for example, are you going to go for a run tomorrow? I genuinely didn't know. I had no capacity to make a decision the day before and to follow through with it. That's just kind of a personal reference point for me. It doesn't matter what it is for you. But I couldn't tell you until the moment came whether or not myself was going to be willing to go for the run, And I created this dynamic, and I think I learned this from my parents in general, I think my mom in particular, where I just observed that there are elements and aspects of yourself that you just can't control, that you can't predict, that you can't persuade, that you can't, and they're over there, and sometimes they do what you want them to do, and sometimes they don't. And that's a weird and kind of frustrating experience to live in, because not only do I have to balance and figure out how to get along with the people in my world, I've also got to figure out how to get along with the elements of myself that I haven't really learned how to control yet. And so that was really strange. So if that's you, if a big part of your experience is that there are things sort of within you that you can't control, that experience isn't just there. Most people are creating that. If it's a part of what it's like to be you, it's coming from you, is this idea. Now, probably I'm creating it without realizing it. There are things that I do, and a lot of it does is this forcing, this kind of like adversarial kind of attitude that I have. I'm going to force myself to do it. Like for example, with cold showers, that's one thing. I'm going to force myself to take this cold shower. But I remember I caught myself thinking that. That's kind of the cool thing about awareness. I was in the bathroom and I was standing there and I was ready to get in the shower, but I was just kind of putting it off, because I didn't want to feel this cold water in my body. And I said, okay, I got to force myself to do this. And I was like, but wait a minute, what self am I forcing? What part is not me? What part is not me? The part that's going to feel the water is me. The part right now that's procrastinating is me. And I just discovered this ability that I could become any of those things. That rather than dissociating from them, I could associate into them and realize that they were me. And it was as if there's this big thing that's me, and there's a little point that feels like me, and that little point was jumping around, and wherever that little point didn't feel like me, even though it was. And I really kind of like expanded that bubble out there, and I said, I'm the person who wants to have taken a cold shower. I'm the person who has this irrational fear of the feeling of cold. I'm the person who's trying to talk himself into just taking a warm shower instead. And if you don't care about cold showers and you think that's totally stupid, that doesn't matter. Substitute in whatever matters for you. And I realized, holy shit, I'm all of these people. I'm all of these things. There's nobody here but me. It's all just me. And it just melted away. And it was as if I was treating myself like two people, and it was as if like if I got in the cold shower, you suddenly were going to be in the cold shower, and I was going to have you to contend with. Can you imagine? You know what I mean? But it wasn't that at all. It was all me and the person who was going to feel the sensations and the person, and it just gave me all this freedom. And I think that it changed my attitude. It instead of it's kind of like, I don't know if you've seen the movie Liar Liar when Jim Carrey's character is trying desperately to get this court case postponed because he needs to lie so that he can be a good attorney, but he can't lie because his son put some kind of a voodoo hex on him, and so he basically is in the bathroom and he's like, how am I gonna get out of this? How am I gonna make this work? And then he says, he accidentally hurt himself, and he said, oh my God, I can beat myself up and then go back into court, and then they'll see how beaten up I am, and they'll have no choice but to postpone it. That for me was a lot of times how I got myself to do different things, was that I was kind of like doing like this, and forcing against these inclinations and things. But when I discovered that it was all me, I started becoming interested in persuading myself, persuading the different aspects of me to kind of get on board with doing this thing, to find out like what does not taking this action, what is it made of? Like what do I check inside and feel, and what meaning do I assign to that feeling? And how do I talk myself into or out of an idea, an experience that, okay, it's on this day, it's time to not do this thing that will feel good to have done. On this day, it's time to go ahead and do this thing and say this thing to Melissa, even though I know that never works, even though I know it doesn't create the outcome that I want. And that gave me a lot of relief, because I realized I was in complete control of what I thought, felt, and did. You know, it doesn't mean I always think, feel, and do smart things. I definitely don't. But when I don't, I know that it's not myself doing it to me. You know what I mean? That I just haven't taken the time to figure out and to go in and find out where the bugs are and kind of sort them out.
Yeah, and that's where how do you do that? How do you find out where they are? It's by watching. And that the whole process of like becoming more aware, that is, you know, this gentle watching that we talk about in probably every video that we do, because of the fact that it's like it's noticing. It's noticing, how do I talk myself into and out of doing certain things? And the thing is most people, if you're, you know, the average person, pretty much everybody, I mean, I'd say like 99, very few people are not living, we all live by autopilot. You know, like we've got just automatic ways that we operate our minds. And this is all happening behind the scenes. It happens so quickly that we don't even know how we talk ourselves into or out of things, because it's just so habitual. Like our brains get really, really good at doing things that they've done a lot. And so when you do things, it's almost as though you are not doing it consciously and actively. It does feel like it's almost like someone else, because it's just so routine for you. And so when you start watching how you go about your day, how do I get myself to the point of, you know, saying something that I later regret, or doing something I later am like, I thought I was going to stop doing that, or I thought I was going to start doing this. And it's never because you didn't force yourself enough. It's because you don't have a good enough idea of how you create these situations. And that's where watching, gentle, non-judgmental observation of yourself, where you start to see, oh, it doesn't make sense that I do that, but I do it. And it feels so natural, and it's so easy for me to do. I can like do it in my sleep pretty much. I can get myself into this state. I can assign meanings, make certain assumptions. I can, you know, uncharitably interpret something he said and create like a fight out of absolute nowhere, like magic. And it's something I just am really good at.
We should demo this sometime.
I'm really good at it. I watched my mother do it. I watch people do it. And so it's like something that's so second nature to me. But until I actually saw in the moments when I was building up bad feelings towards you about a situation, it's like, oh my gosh, if I keep down this path, and that's the beauty of awareness, if I keep down this path, I noticed this thought. If I keep on this, I know I'm going to create a fight. I know this is going to lead somewhere that I do not want to go. I know when I do this thing, it's going to lead to me not doing this good thing that I want to do. And so when you see earlier in the process, that's like the cure-all. And it's not forcing yourself to change. It's not saying, do this, not that. You know you're not supposed to do that. And like, you know, it's noticing. It's almost like instead of, you know, it's just these little red flags in your mind. It's like, oh, there's a thought, there's something, there's a feeling. And that's why it really is. It's getting in tune with yourself, and developing awareness is seeing behind your own scenes. And so you take these unconscious processes and you start noticing them and seeing how you're creating your life experience. That's how change occurs. It's much more subtle, and it's much more profound and impactful, because you can actually see how you're weaving something together instead of just seeing it after the fact.
It's interesting. I feel like a lot of it has to do with this. Usually if I'm going to start doing something not smart, it begins with like an othering process. And so I used to have a lot of anxiety like at nighttime. Like I'd be trying to go, like years ago, I would trying to go to sleep, and I would think about like just stupid things I had said from years before. Sometimes it was that day. A lot of times it was from like years before. I mean, in kindergarten, embarrassing things that happened. And I could actually create inside myself like this real apprehension, this intense anxiety, like where I was just really nervous. Then I'd notice how nervous I was, and I get nervous about that. And it was just kind of out of control. And it doesn't matter if it's anxiety, or if it's anger, or if it's depression, or if it's negativity, or whatever. It's like if I'm hearing a voice inside my head, and I can't make it go away. It helps me a lot of the times to say, that's me, that voice is me. And the person observing that voice is me. And the person worried about that voice is me. And that feeling of anxiety, that's me. That feeling of anger, that's me. The problem happens when I start pointing my kind of mental fingers at something outside of what I experience as myself. That, it's not me. There's me, and then there's this bad feeling. And as soon as that feeling is othered, as soon as I dissociate from that feeling is like a little devil with a pitchfork, and it's kind of but there's this relief that comes with it. You get this intense feeling of anxiety. The walls are closing in on you, and you say, oh, that sensation of the walls closing in, that's me. And the person who doesn't realize that sensation is them is me. And the person who's now telling me that all of these things are me is me. And there's this perpetual, it's kind of a reconciliation. It's this kind of it's reintegration, really, in a way, in the moment. That like, there is nobody but self. There's nothing but self. The worry is me. That picture that I'm making about things that might happen tomorrow, oh, that's just me. There's nothing to worry about. And what it is this kind of like clean sweep of your mind where you realize that there's nothing in there but you. It's wonderful. It's this fantastic thing. And you go through it. You don't feel bad about any of this stuff. You just say, that concern is me. That worry is me. That anger. I mean, I used to feel this like visceral, like physical sensation of rage that would just kind of boil up from my stomach into my chest and out into my limbs. And it would make me want to smash something or throw something. I remember at one point, one of the last times this ever happened, I had like a little Bluetooth speaker. And it sounded great and it worked well, but it would never connect to the phone. And I would always need it to connect when I had waited a long time to exit, and I couldn't get it to connect, and it just wouldn't work. And it was like, I don't maybe I was an idiot. I don't know. But anyway, I threw this thing across the room, and then afterwards I was so just sort of like mortified by that ridiculous behavior that I was like, God, what was that made out of? And I kind of traced it back, and I was like, well, there's this big feeling, and I kept telling myself it should be working. And then somehow or another, it was like I was like kindling in a fire that I had to get going in my belly so I could have an outburst. And then it kind of flowed up, and there was like a physical sensation in my limbs. And I got relief from it when I flung this thing across the room. And I was like, okay, well, it'd be great if I could deal with that feeling without flinging things and breaking things and acting like I'm like 4, And the way that I did that was I felt that feeling, and then kind of like the next time, and I said, that sensation is me. There's not me and rage. There's the thing that I feel like is me, and then there's that feeling, and that feeling is me too. And that was just kind of like, okay, that's fine. It didn't have to get out. It didn't have to go through. When I'm feeling negative, well, I'm trying to be positive, but there's this negative voice inside my head, or these negative thoughts and you can call them, what's that phrase, that like an infinitely unhelpful phrase, something recurring negative thought. When you name something, you've othered it. You know what I'm saying? And there's all these different special types of negative thoughts that someone decided you can't control. It's like, don't you see that you're pushing it out so that you're less responsible for it? You sense it as being something
automatic negative thoughts. I think.
You know what I mean? And
I have. People will say that I have this thing, and this is such a huge thing to look out for when you name things. And that's why the whole process of naming and diagnosing things is so like fundamentally flawed, because again, you're othering it. There's this thing and it's not me, or it's doing this thing to me. But this integration that we're talking about, this is realizing that it's all you, and that's where ultimate empowerment comes from. Because if it's othered, if it's coming from outside of you, there's nothing you can do about it. I have a problem, I have a disease, I have uncontrollable negative thoughts, and they're just there. And then you become a victim. But when you do this integration, when you realize it's all you, you have ultimate power. Well,
it kind of makes me laugh because I have automatic negative thoughts, but they are a narcissist. See, they are. I have. That's kind of this funny thing. But it helps me a tremendous amount because this othering is so unconscious, and it's so automatic, and it's so easy to do. And I mean, if you take it to the really interesting extreme of the consciousness being the only reality, I tell myself that you're other than me, and then I can get really angry at you, or I can get really irritated, or I can get really put out or offended, and then I can interact with you in ways that aren't useful. But if you're doing something I don't like, and I say my whole world is nothing but myself pushed out, and that feeling of kind of warlike sensation, I had to other you before I could start blaming you and finding fault with you. Because if I recognized that you were just me pushed out, well, then I'd be much more motivated to find a useful and intelligent way of interacting with you because you're me. You know what I mean? And I find this to be the case. And so the disinclination. So let's say, for example, I want to start exercising, So there's a desire to start exercising. That's me. There's a certain physical body that I have right now. That's me. There is a disinclination, or there's a fear, or there's a worry. I don't want to look stupid. I don't want to feel uncomfortable. That's me. That's me. It's all me. And I start saying, oh, okay, everything's fine. Now, what do I want to do? There is this kind of freedom that comes with it, and you stop kind of like pushing yourself around. I, for a long time, was doing like the equivalent of driving with the emergency brake on, or pushing the gas pedal down like super hard. You know what I mean? Or like or squeezing the steering wheel really hard. It's like, you don't require a lot of force or a lot of effort. And I know that like when I was little and in school or at home and I was very relaxed, just having fun, if someone rebuked me or criticized me or got mad about something I had done, my response was to become physically tense. It's like my neck would get tense and my shoulders would get tense and I rounded forward and all this different stuff. And so I can actually watch my physical body now, and I can know that if there's a voice inside my head that I'm treating as though it's not me, think about this. Like right now, as you're listening to this video, there is a felt sense of I or of self somewhere inside of you. I don't know where it is, right? But there are also thoughts. Some of them feel like thoughts that you are thinking, and some of them feel like thoughts that are just there. They snuck in. You don't want them there. You're trying to get rid of them, but you can't. And learn to notice the difference. Like learn to notice when you're experiencing aspects of yourself as other than yourself. Like if you go to if you're at work, let's say, and you're trying to be more positive, but there's like that one person that just annoys the crap out of you, and you're sitting there trying to be positive, and then they come along, and then there's all these kind of unlovely thoughts about that person. That chatter is you. It doesn't feel like you. I'm very good at creating, at doing things inside my mind and feeling like those things are just happening or they're being done to me. Everyone can do this, but if you start noticing, you say, "Oh, those thoughts are me," and then you say, "Ooh, also." So that criticism of that person, that's me. And then that criticism of myself that I put onto me as a result of being critical. See, it's actually interesting. As I'm talking about this, I'm realizing how weird it is. So there's the me I experience myself to be. There's the I, that feeling, that sensation. Then there's the me that's critical of them. And then there's the me that's critical of the sense of I because of the thing that's not me that's critical of them. And so there's all this weird kind of, and so what I like to do is go around and just reclaim all of it. Like I'm the person who wants to be positive. I'm the person that can be a real negative jerk sometimes. I'm also the person that makes me feel really bad for occasionally being negative. I am all of these things. And the more you kind of bring those things in, I find the more you redeem them. Do you know what I mean? The more there's like this kind of freedom. And you when you realize that it's you, it's like if you realize that someone is your child, you might feel differently about them. Like you read in the newspaper or someone did something bad and you say, that person needs to get a severe punishment so this thing won't happen. But then all of a sudden, somehow you didn't know this, but it turns out that it's your child. Or maybe you didn't know you had a child and you found out this person on death row is your child. Or, you just knew the facts of the case, but you didn't know who they were. Then you discovered that they were your kid. You feel differently. You start saying, but there's the capacity for redemption here. I know what they did is terrible, but you know what I mean? I know that negative thinking is not great. I know that thing I did. I know this feeling is not pleasant and all this, but you know what? I feel differently about it once I realize it's me. I'm kind of more loving. I'm kind of more accepting. I'm kind of more, it's not like sticky, saccharine, sweet love. It's more of like that kind of love that says, this is fine, we can work with this, we can deal with this, this is no big deal, this isn't something to be worried about. And for me, I just like to be very aware of what's going on inside my mind, and I like to realize that whatever's there is me. Might sound like my mom or my dad or my grandmother or whoever, but that's me impersonating them in my head. It's me recreating for myself the experience of interactions that I had with them a long time ago. And if I can recognize that, I can respond resourcefully to it. If I can recognize that voice is me, that feeling is me, all of those things, even though they feel like they're not me, they are. I feel less threatened. My heart rate kind of slows down. My palms are a little bit less sweaty. They're just the normal amount of sweaty they always are. Instead of like the nervous sweaty, And then I can start interacting and behaving intelligently. And then I can start improving my experience. My experience does get better and better and better the more resourcefully I interact with it. And one of the first kind of ways I can cue somebody to start interacting intelligently, resourcefully with their experience is to say, there's nothing in your experience right now that's not you. There's nothing going on inside your head that's not you. It feels like it. Sometimes it's scary. I mean, I know, kind of an example. I was kind of a weird kid, and I would in bed at night, I'd be laying there, and if I wasn't worried about something embarrassing that had happened to me, I would sleep sometimes like on my side like this on the pillow, this here, my hands on the pillow, and I would hear the pulse in my ear, or somewhere in my head, I could hear this pulse. I don't know if you ever done this.
Oh my gosh, it would freak me out as a kid.
And I started having all these weird fantasies that it was a person in the house, and it was their footsteps.
Stepping, yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and at one point, this is really weird, I lived in North Carolina at the time, I imagined that there was like a Tyrannosaurus Rex wrecks in California, and that every was a step that it took.
You
and
must
it was
have
like,
seen
oh, it's a long way
Jurassic
away.
Park or something.
It's a long way away, but one day it's going to arrive. Now, I don't know if that's a death metaphor or what, but anyway, when that sound, when I imagine that sound was something other than me, my own pulse. I mean, I think most people would think of their own kind of heart beating and the sounds that it makes us being them. When I imagine it as maybe being something else, ooh, was that someone in the house? Was that a footstep in the hallway? Is that something rustling in the closet? Because it sounds like a rustle because of like the way that the pillowcase is. When I imagined it was something other than me, I got all afraid about it. I got very scared of it. But when I recognized that it was me, it didn't sound any different. It didn't, sensorily, it was exactly the same. That voice inside your head that's criticizing you, telling you you're a piece of crap, telling you that they're a piece of crap, telling you you're a piece of crap for telling yourself that they're a piece of crap. When you recognize that it's you, it becomes kind of like that pulse. Because if you say something stupid and then you realize that it's not real or not true or whatever, you're just kind of like, yeah, I mean, I thought it was, but now I recognize how dumb that was. Now I don't think that anymore. When someone else thinks it, though, you get hung up on it. You know what I'm saying? Like and I feel like when there's a voice inside my head that's telling me things I don't want to hear, when I think that, when I not intellectually think it's not me, but when I have an experience of it as being a parental figure that's disapproving or someone, a friend of mine or a boss or something like that, I can create an experience of it that's really unpleasant. But when I recognize, that voice, even though it sounds like so-and-so, or is saying the things that so-and-so said to me when I was little, that voice is just me. It's fine. Don't worry about that. It becomes kind of like the rantings of like these people. There are people, if you go like to Santa Monica, there'll be people on the street that will just kind of scream at you. And, there are a lot of times they don't have anywhere, they're homeless, and they're maybe a little bit kind of unstable, or their situations are so bad that they've dissociated from reality as a protective mechanism. And they'll say terrible shit to you. And they'll say absolutely terrible things to you. And you may feel uncomfortable, and you may feel bad for them, you may have compassion for them, you may feel unsafe, but I personally would never take it personally that they were saying those things. It's so obvious that person is saying what they're saying as a result of where they are in life, what it's like to be them in that moment in time. But if a person has a job and a house and they're clean and they seem like they're relatively mentally stable and they say some negative shit about me, I'll get all upset about that. I don't understand why I don't say to myself, well, okay, they've got some nice clothes on, but the fact that they're being a jerk, it's the same reason the other person was being a jerk. Who they are, where they are, how they're feeling, what it's like to be them. It's all that stuff. And then I start to recognize that the bad feeling I could have created wasn't them saying something to me. It was me saying that what they said means something about me. And there's just immense freedom there. And everything just becomes so much more work-withable because it's all you.
Cookie has a really interesting comment. She says, awareness is bittersweet. And I think I get what you mean. I'd love to, if you want to explain a little more of what you mean, because I've definitely felt that. But I think that it is partial awareness is bittersweet. Mm-hmm. Full awareness is sweet. Full awareness is blissed out. Oh my gosh, it's the realization that it's all coming from me. Everything is changeable. Everything is moldable. It's true and pure freedom without any restrictions. The bittersweet partial awareness comes when you're starting the process and you're noticing things and then you're going unconscious again, or you're going into those judgy modes and you're judging yourself for the things that you're seeing, and you're seeing how unlovely it is, and you are you're getting off, as she calls it, getting off the awareness highway, and you're slipping back into old patterns that cause you to be judgmental of self, not liking what you saw, not being sure that you can change what it is that you're seeing. And that is bittersweet, because that's just like, oh, I'm seeing this, but I don't feel like I can change it, or it feels like a lot of work to change it. And so I don't know if that's totally your experience, but I know what that's like. And the solution is to keep watching and to keep growing in your awareness, and that integration of seeing this is all me, it's all coming from me. Also, it's all changeable by me. There's nothing, one of the principles that helped me really early on, because, when we started all of this work, it was in the midst of major relationship issues. Like, our relationship was my main impetus to make changes, because here's this great person that I wanted to be with, but my patterns of relating in like a significant other type of relationship were not good at all whatsoever. And Steve was like, hey, I like you, I think you're great, but I'm not interested in a life that consists of, consistent fighting and all that. And And so I had to kind of like really look at a lot of these things. And one of the things I told him at the beginning of our relationship was like, oh, I'm just crazy. This is just the way I am. I've had certain traumas, certain things have happened to me. My parents were this certain way. And so that here I am, the sum of all of that. And there were take it or leave it. I didn't think that changing these things that felt like very deep fundamental aspects of my personality, be they negative, but they just seem like, well, that's just me. I'm sorry. But realizing that your personality is a process and there's nothing about you that can't change. There's nothing about your experience of others, your experience of yourself that can't be transformed through this awareness, was really exciting to me. I was kind of like, oh, even the most unlovely thing about me, the most unlovely pattern can change. And I feel like I'm living proof that that's true, because a lot of things about me have changed so much. And when certain patterns bubble back up, like extreme like judginess, or like this is the way and that's not the way, and you're doing things that aren't the way, and that means all this bad stuff about you and you need to change. Like I notice when those patterns come back up, and I'm very interested in it because I know that is also part of me. And it's, whatever situation or person is causing these things to start to bubble up within me, there's something for me to learn there. And so I use the opportunities to learn, and I still have some bittersweet moments with awareness, but more and more often it's sweet.
Yeah, it's kind of like bittersweet chocolate. It's like, it's like the whole candy bar is bittersweet. I think with awareness, it's like the first half is the bitter, and then the second half is the sweet. A lot of times what happens is that when a person is becoming more aware, you're looking more and you're seeing more clearly and you're paying attention to what you're seeing. And so, of course, you're going to see some stuff that's not really that great. If you didn't see things that were not that great, then the whole awareness exercise would be a waste of time. If you practiced all this awareness and you never saw anything that awareness could fix, you might as well not being aware, And I think it's learning how to see something and go, isn't that interesting? And learning how to... it's interesting because it's partly not identifying with it, but it in that kind of judgy way. But it's also that recognizing, oh, it's all me. Not only am I not just the condemned. Like if I condemn myself, I am the condemner and the condemned and the condemnation. I'm the whole thing. I'm doing this all kind of to myself. And so it kind of takes the sting away from it in a way. And again, it's that othering. That othering is the beginning of so much that doesn't serve us. When we think of other people, or, it's interesting because what happens is that we look out and see other people, and then we start to also push out our experience of them. And I want to push my experience of you out and tag it on you so that you're responsible for it instead of me. But I can be having an immensely unpleasant experience of another person. And if I can remember that experience is me, it's my doing. It doesn't matter what they're doing. It doesn't matter how justified I am in having the experience that I'm having. My experience of them is me. It is me. It's a thing I'm doing. If I recognize that, it can be a negative thing. It can still be unpleasant, but it's not. I don't suffer over it anymore because I'm just. It's like when you're doing something and you aren't doing it all that skillfully. And you're not like torn up about it. You're not like upset with it. You're just kind of like, I'm not doing a very good job here. Pretty much any time we go do any kind of craft, if we're carving, jack-o'-lanterns, if we're like, I don't know, let's do examples of this stuff. If we're going ice skating, I'm acutely aware that I'm not doing a very good job at that thing. I suck at everything the first time I do it. Maybe 5 or 10 times, you know what I mean? Or let me sit down and kind of like talk to someone who knows how to do it. I can start, but there's like people... I can get really good at almost anything if I practice it a little bit. But in terms of like walking into the place and being great my first time out, I suck at it. It doesn't matter. I could be walking across a room I've never walked across before. I'm not doing a very good job. And, I can see that and be aware of it though. But it doesn't really bother me. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And for me, it's like I look at my experience in that same kind of way. Like how skillfully am I creating this experience right now? I'm like, not very. I'm not doing a very good job. I'm not doing a very good job creating what it's like to be me right now. If I'm criticizing another person or if I'm just feeling kind of just negative or something like that, like I'm not doing a very good job doing me right now. Am I doing a good job of responding resourcefully to not doing a very good job of doing me right now? Well, yeah, I'm doing pretty okay. And then all of a sudden, it's like I've got a little bit of momentum there. And it's that, again, it just takes the sting out of everything. The more you stop the othering, the less you suffer over what the seeming other's doing or saying or thinking or feeling. The more you embrace, just call it all kind of unto yourself and just say, that's me. That worry that I'm a failure, that's me. That worry about paying the bills, that's me. That worry about tomorrow, that's me. That concern, that fear, oh, that's me too. It's all me. It's all me. And you start thinking, God, now I can create a lot of stuff. I'm creating a lot of these things. And when you stop doing this little magic trick where you create a dragon and then you turn around and you look back and say, oh my God, when you start recognizing, oh, this is all stuff that I'm doing. That thought is me. You know what else I'm doing? Not only am I doing that thought, I'm also doing thinking in a way that doesn't seem like thinking. I'm doing thinking in a way that makes me feel like that thought is just happening. I'm doing that too. And then something else will come to your attention. You'll say, oh, but what about this? And then you just want to include that. You want to say, oh my God, I'm doing that. And I'm doing it in a way that allows me to have no idea that I'm actually doing it. Isn't that interesting? And isn't that neat? And who's that saying that? Well, that's me. And there's just this kind of continual. A long time ago, I had this exercise. I used to push negative thoughts away. And I had this idea because it didn't work. I was laying in bed and I would push these thoughts away and it was like 10 more would come back. And I started to say, what if I just kind of welcomed all of these negative thoughts into my mind? Well, just to try, just to see what would happen. And every time a negative thought came up, I said, okay, come over here. You're okay. Come on in. I just let them all come in. I invited them all into my mental house because trying to push them out didn't work. And so I started to say, come on in. You're okay. I accept you, blah, 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 whatever. And it was almost as if they just kind of wanted a little reassurance. They just wanted a little bit of attention. And it actually kind of, I think I got the idea from, I read that Timothy Leary, back in like the 60s and 70s, crime was really bad and all this stuff. And so people were putting huge padlocks on their door and all this different stuff. And Timothy Leary lived in a neighborhood. It was like a cool neighborhood, but I think there was some crime and stuff. And one of the things he did is that he left his door wide open and he had a sign up top that said, hey, no need to knock, come on in. And nobody did it because they were like, what kind of a psychopath is going to be inviting people into their house? Nobody broke into this guy's house. And I found that kind of the negative thoughts, they kind of worked that way too. When I invited them in, I was like, oh, is that the best that you can do? Is that as negative as you can get? You're worried about, this person being mad at you tomorrow? You could die. I mean, something really terrible could happen. And as I kind of egged them on and goaded them on, it changed my whole relationship to them. Because there's something about trying to force yourself to be positive where you're kind of really afraid of those negative thoughts. You know what I mean? Like in your kind of heart of hearts, you're really afraid of that anxiety. And so you're trying, I'm calm. I'm doing my mantra, I'm calm. But if you're like, oh, if we're going to do anxiety, we might as well turn this up a notch. Let's really freak the fuck out here and really get concerned. There's something about that attitude that's so antithetical to being anxious or so just incompatible with being worried that it achieves more indirectly than can be kind of directly achieved. And so I think just kind of like reclaiming your mental space and saying, oh, that's mine, that's me, that's all me. You start realizing that there's a ton of things that you can do. And the wonderful thing is that you can realize that there's a ton of things that you can do without having to actually do any of them. And I love that, because I mean, if you can actually discover a lot of what you're capable of without having had to do those things first, then you can just kind of realize everything that's an option for you and kind of go about your business, kind of avail yourself of those possibilities at your leisure. But I think it is just kind of asserting your dominion in your mind. And a lot of that is recognizing that's me. I mean, if this hand, can you imagine if I had an experience of this hand not being me and I'm trying to talk to you and the whole time it's doing all this different stuff and I'm so apologetic about it, but at some point I got to say this hand, that's me. And I didn't realize it was me, but it is. I mean, if you got thoughts that are slapping you around, if you realize they were you, they probably wouldn't be doing that. And so I think that, the more embarrassed I got about it, the more mortified, humiliated, probably the less I'd notice that actually I can feel this hand and I can tell that it's me. And you know what I mean? The more upset with the consequences I became, the less I would be in a position to notice the cause of those consequences. But if I just kind of chill out and calm down and look, I realize, oh my goodness, it's actually me. And then it's really freeing. Then you get to interact with other people, and then they're really mean to you or something like that, and you go, oh, that's actually me. And then you get into a really interesting world.
I love that. It's like one of my favorite Alan Watts quotes is like, if I am my foot, I am the sun. And it's just like that most biggest expansion of realizing it's all one thing. It's all one energy. If I am, like, I identify as like this selfness that's like somewhere behind my eyes, but I also have this foot. Like if I am also my foot, then I'm literally everything. I'm my foot. I'm the sun. I'm a snail. I'm you. Like it's all one thing, and it's such a. It's a mind blowing concept, but it's also like ultimately freeing. It's ultimately comforting and relaxing. It's it's the polarity. It's dark and light. It's just it's all one thing. It all exists. Nothing can be created or destroyed. And those ideas, I feel like, unlock so much just joy and ability to just be and relax, and realizing that you don't have to force yourself to change. There's nothing to force. It's just all you. And it's kind of a game, and you start to play the game of life more skillfully. That's just what we're all about. Playing the game of life more, like figuring out, oh, okay, that's how this is. This is how this is. This is how it works. This is how people and relationships and, shadows and things I'm afraid of, things I'm worried about, how they come into my life and they teach me lessons, and I get it. And you just get a little better at it each day of navigating and playing the game more skillfully, having more fun, relaxing, enjoying yourself. And you realize it's not a matter of forcing yourself to be different than you are. It's just a greater recognition of who and what you are. And it's really, really super fun. So I hope you guys found that helpful tonight. Yeah,
it's interesting. One of the last things to kind of think about, and to kind of get away from that kind of stupid spirituality that I sometimes need to, I'm so relieved when I realize that I don't have to do it, that when I'm aware that I am my environment, I interact with my environment more intelligently. When I'm aware that I am my partner, I interact with my partner more intelligently. When I realize that I am kind of these people that I don't necessarily like in the world, I tend to interact with people that I don't necessarily like more intelligently, more resourcefully. Doesn't mean I want them in my face all the time. I'm also my foot. I don't want my foot in my face all the time. The fact that there's this kind of oneness that permeates everything doesn't mean that I want everything in my face, in my reality, in my experience all the time. And so I think that freeing yourself from a pressure or burden to reconcile those things is really liberating. As far as I can tell, this expression of love or this expression of oneness or whatever, it's not all platonic love, or it's not like love is interpersonal. People think it's responding resourcefully. So if I come into contact with someone that I dislike more than I've ever disliked anyone in my whole life, if I respond resourcefully to the fact that I've encountered that person and I feel about them the way that I do, I think that in some interesting, situationally appropriate way, I have expressed love for that person. I've seen them and I have kind of played a role in my own experience of being kind of a redemptive force of them in my life. And so it's not like, oh, so-and-so doesn't get along with so he's not as spiritual as this person who pretends to get along with everybody. I don't find that really useful. And I find that the people who try to do that burden themselves with an impossible task that interferes with stuff that's a lot more enriching, things that could really improve what it's like to be them a whole lot more. So you don't have to like everyone. That's the good news.
Oh, little thing before we go. Since I'm going out of town, Steve needs things to do because I'm not going to be here. So we're doing a special on his 3-call series. If you want a little coaching, little clarity, help you to, realize this is all coming from you and how you can improve and change your life, hit us up. Hire him.
She gets really concerned when she's going out of town.
Keep him busy over the next few days. I think it'd just be a fun thing to do. So good night. We love you guys. Thanks for being here, and we'll see you again in another video.
See ya.